welcome, and thank you for joining us tonight. My name is Jason Berschke. I'm the Director of Alumni Relations at Mercersburg. This is my 23rd year at Mercersburg Academy. I have a little bit of an unusual path in that I taught math at Mercersburg for 18 years, and I'm just finishing up my 5th year in this position. And just like everyone else, the COVID pandemic has affected the school and affected our work these past couple months. But it's been really inspiring and humbling the way that we've seen alumni and families get together during these difficult times and get together around Mercersburg and use this as an opportunity to connect with each other, to connect with the school, and to connect and celebrate the work of our alumni. This is actually our 61st virtual event over these past 3 months. So we've really been going at a pretty fast pace, but we've been able to bring in over 1,500 guests during these. And they've really been a great way to connect with people. And regardless of what happens, we're certainly going to continue these virtual events. But I really appreciate you guys coming in and joining us and learning and just sharing ideas with us. And a special note of gratitude to our hosts and our panelists tonight. Tonight's program was going to be part of the reunion weekend. And so we've pivoted and moved it to a virtual event, and which means we're able to bring a wider net of people in and more people in to join us, which is great. So thank you very much for joining us. I'm going to first introduce our moderator. Our moderator is Lois Finley, class of 1980, who recently joined and celebrated her virtual 40th reunion with her classmates. But she's a regular visitor to campus, and it's really great that we're able to celebrate her this way also. She served on the Alumni Council for 6 years. She's the founder of Elements Consulting, a software implementation business process and project management consulting firm based outside of Annapolis. So thank you very much for joining us. And I'm going to, before I pass it over completely to Lois, I'm going to be monitoring the kind of Q&A section of this. So feel free to, the webinar it doesn't allow you to speak and ask questions, but feel free to use the Q&A section of it, and I'll be able to feed it to the panel throughout the session. So once again, thank you, and now to you, Lois.
Great, thanks so much, Jason. Welcome everyone, good evening or late afternoon, depending on where you are. I'm very excited to moderate this illustrious panel of relatively young entrepreneurs. I'd like to start by asking each of you to just introduce yourselves, where you are, and just a brief summary of what your business is. And I'm going to start with Taria.
Okay, hello everyone. My name is Taria. I am Mercersburg class of 2010. And currently I am based in the Washington, D.C. metro area. And I run an event company called Amala Vida Events, where we specialize in weddings and special events. And I also am assistant general manager of Fiorella's Italian Kitchen at the National Harbor.
Thank you. Ethan?
Hi, yes, Ethan Kaiser, class of 2010. I ran a company called Study Tree for like the last 5 years. And then I moved on to Cisco, where I currently work now as a manager of the engineering teams. And I also am working on a few other projects related to artificial intelligence and gun control. So I have a few projects I'm working on. I also do investing, so whole entrepreneur experience.
Great, thank you. Nikolai?
Hi, I'm Nikolai, also class of 2010. Let's see, so I'm based in Seattle, and I helped co-found a company called Umbra Sunglasses. We make armless sunglasses, so just as a background, sunglasses have always been like a frustrating product for me. They've always fallen off, broken, or gotten lost, or gave me headaches right here. So along with my friend Jensen, we co-founded a brand called Umbras that makes armless sunglasses. So they don't break, they don't fall off, they're ultra comfortable. And we're also the most carbon negative brand in the world by planting 20 trees for every pair we sell. So we actually offset 330 times the carbon generated through producing and delivering each pair through planting 20 trees. So super proud of that.
Great. Thanks, Nikolai. And Paul.
Hey everyone, excited to be here. Class of 2010 as well. Was at Mercersburg for 2 years. Right now I'm based in Brooklyn, New York, and I co-founded a company called Revel. So Revel is actually the largest shared electric vehicle operator in the US. So we operate large shared fleets of electric mopeds. So when I say moped, think of Vespa style scooter, but it's all electric. So we're based in New York. Our largest fleet is in New York. We operate a fleet of about 2,000 vehicles here. We're also in Washington, D.C., Austin, Oakland, and Miami as well.
Well, great. Thanks so much, everyone. I'm going to start with a set of questions, and I'm going to leave it as a free-for-all for anyone who wants to answer. First, we'd like to hear a little bit about the path. What made you consider taking the risk of creating your own company? And I'll open it up to anyone.
Well, I know for me, I personally am a very laid back, go with the flow type of person. And I started to think, well, you know, you don't like a schedule. You don't like to really be told what to do. Like, you should probably start something of your own and, you know, lead people in a way that you were led, you know, growing up. And I also wanted to start some type of legacy for my family. And so it really pushed me to, you know, do something on my own, as well as obviously I still have to work for someone else for a while, but the plan is to totally work for myself. So that's definitely what pushed me to start a company, for sure.
I guess I can follow up as well. So I always knew that I wanted to be an entrepreneur. I'd always had a difficult time being told what to do by anyone. Some of my old teachers at Mercersburg might remember that, as well as some of my classmates. So it really seemed like the right path for me. After college, I went and worked for Amazon, and that kind of gave me a skill set to apply to e-commerce, and to really gave me a great understanding of the e-commerce landscape. One of the things I'd always wanted to do in my life was create a physical product, like something tangible. So, you know, something that wasn't web-based, that wasn't digital, something that I could actually feel and hold in my hands. And also something that had served a purpose and had a function in this world. So, you know, we go to Walmart, we go to Target sometimes, and I'd always found myself wondering, how is there so much crap in this world, useless crap? And so we wanted to create something that solved an issue and served a purpose, and kind of didn't break and wasn't designed to break.
I think for me, I'm just probably the worst employee that anyone could ever hire. So I was doing a kind of benefit to any future employer. Now, not the worst, I've grown out of it, but I was pretty bad. And I've always lived my life like taking all the risk all the time, calculated, of course. I never would want to look back and like regret something. And it's kind of cliche now, but for the longest time, I've always felt that way. And I can still remember, since we're at the Mercersburg alumni here, one of my biggest stepping stones as like a young adult or young man was when I was at Mercersburg and I put on a magic show. Maybe some of you guys remember it, in front of like the entire student body. It was by far the hardest thing I've ever done, as far as like just like putting yourself out there and like putting it all on the line. And ever since that, I think it was like a student assembly. Ever since that, everything has been easy. I've done TV, I've done all kinds of crazy stuff, and none of that has given me the same like nervousness as going in front of all my peers at Mercersburg. So I think for me, I just love the risk and I love the adrenaline rush. And then once you do it enough, it just becomes kind of fun. And I don't want to stop the party, so we just keep going with it. And that's kind of what got me into it.
I remember that magic show.
I appreciate that.
I do that magic show.
Yeah, I agree with Ethan, where I think there's an element of being attracted to risk that I've always just liked a big idea. But for me, it's an element of timing, and then it's partly combining my interests and then just my innate personality. So interest, I studied chemical engineering at school and in college at Penn State. I've always been interested in just energy and transportation, sort of the two industries that just make life possible, that just exist, that you don't really think much about. And then also just thinking about how those industries are going to change or need to change over the next 5, 10, 20 years. So that was sort of like my pet interest, always reading about it, always learning about it, studied it in school. And then just personality, like Ethan said, kind of a risk taker, like big ideas, really like creating something from scratch and building something from the ground floor. So those sort of two things combined and formed where I am now.
Okay. So panelists, what is one characteristic you think all entrepreneurs should have?
Persistence. And yeah, I would say persistence is like one of the key characteristics. I think it was easy for me for a very long time. It's not easy for many people, I've noticed this, but like just getting up every day and putting it all on the line and getting up the next day and doing it again. And it's extremely daunting, and doing this for years with no benefit in sight. And that's kind of the hardest thing. Like, it's super easy to work hard when you know that there's a benefit at the end of it. It's actually not challenging at all. It's really hard to do it when there is no known benefit. And there's just kind of this mystic or this unknown potential, win at the end when you sell your company or whatever you end up doing with it. So I think persistence into the unknown is like extremely challenging. And you just kind of be a little kooky to do it. So I think that's a kind of a quality right there.
Yeah, this is basically a synonym. Go ahead, Taria. I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
This is basically a synonym to what Ethan said, but yeah, tenacity. You're going to hear no way more than yes in your life, and just being able to take those no's and turn them into yeses, and figure out what people want is huge.
For me, I would say resilience. I started my business while working in a bridal shop, working with brides, and that's how I knew I really wanted to work with brides and, and just really make people happy. So if I wouldn't have worked those 7-day weeks and went to work and had clients and then would get off work and go see other clients and, writing down dreams in my notebooks and things like that, I feel like that's really, what it takes to push yourself forward.
For me, there's a lot, but I would say if I had to choose one right now, it would be optimism. I think at the end of the day, by definition, when you're starting a company, it's bound to fail. And a lot of people will tell you that, whether it's friends and family or investors or things aren't going well. So to continue to have a strong outlook and I think that's one thing that I would say is definitely super important.
And I would add self-confidence, which I think it's echoing what I'm hearing from other folks. You have a comment or a question from Amy Moore. Hello, 2010. To follow up on the idea of characteristics needed, how have you taken weaknesses to get help along the way? Have any of these other classmates been a part of your own journey?
Well, my co-founder was my roommate at Mercersburg, so that was kind of cool. He's a great guy. He's like my best friend. So his name was Silvio. He was only there for a year, but he and I co-founded the company and haven't seen each other since Mercersburg, which is kind of interesting, completely remote. So that's how I guess I've worked with one of my colleagues or classmates. What was the other part of the question about weakness? I didn't quite get that.
Yeah. Hang on 1 second. How have you taken weaknesses to get help along the way?
How have I taken weaknesses to get help along the way? So if the question's asking about like what weaknesses have I discovered about myself and how I resolve them, I'll answer that. That's kind of what it sounds like, kind of. The biggest weakness I find in entrepreneurs, including myself when I first started, is that not all opinions are weighted equally. And there's actually an infinite number of advice out there, and a lot of it's bad advice. And people like who love you and care about you will give you bad advice inadvertently, like, oh, this is a really good idea, when it's actually a really bad idea and you shouldn't waste any more time on it. Or like, this is like a new approach, like we should build it this way or build it that way. And like understanding that most people's opinions are wrong and that you should really listen to your customers and people who are paying you money. That's like the most important opinion because they have the most on the line. So understanding that, like, my uncle who like ran a business like selling cars, like it's very different than starting a tech company, right? So that's like a different kind of mindset that a lot of people don't quite understand initially when they start a company.
Yeah, I think just really understanding your own weaknesses, being honest with yourself, and then figuring out the people who are better than you and can complement those weaknesses, and then working with them to hopefully find answers or solutions to the problems you have. It's actually interesting because I called Ethan the other day with an idea that was relevant to my business, and I called him because he's an expert, more of an expert than I am in AI and tech. And I had a question that kind of just like a hypothetical question that I needed help at answering, and he helped me a lot. So that just goes along that same line of utilizing the resources around you and recognizing which people are better at certain things than you and using them as resources.
And using your Mercersburg resources too. I think that's great that you thought to reach out to Ethan. Thank you for sharing that.
For me, my first wedding was an Ethiopian wedding in Virginia, and it was 350 guests. And I called Amy Chase, who's also class of 2010. And I was like, I need your help to help me set up this wedding because I'm in over my head. And she worked me for hours. So definitely enlisted some Mercersburg help myself. But my weakness, I would say, was self-doubt. I think I procrastinated on things because I would be like, oh, Taria, like maybe you don't have time to do this, or maybe this isn't the right thing to do, instead of just like something I had to grow into is just having faith and just doing it. And, you fail, you get back up again and you try again. So I would say that's my weakness, or was my weakness.
Yeah. For me, my co-founder and I have a pretty good yin and yang going. So I think from a personality standpoint, I tend to get into the details too much. So I'm more of a perfectionist, want to make sure things are really good. My co-founder is more move really, really fast, and it doesn't matter how things look. And I think that balances itself pretty well. And then there's just a lot that you don't understand or know when you're starting a company: how to raise money, how to set up your company, how to hire people. So one thing that we did pretty early on is we had an advisory board. And so that advisory board consisted of people that were from the industry or that had run venture-backed startups before, that could help us on more of the technical, logistical ins and outs of just starting and running a company. Yeah.
Okay, great, thanks. A related question is, obviously along the lines of taking risks, sometimes you're going to make mistakes, whether it's, to Ethan's point, you got bad advice or you just misjudged a situation, whatever. I'm curious to hear from all of the panelists if you had a mistake that you're willing to share that you really learned something from for moving forward.
I would say for myself, I did favors, and especially in events, it's easy for people to say, hey, can you just come help me with this really quick, for my party? It only take you a couple minutes, and then I'm there for 3 hours and I'm broke a sweat and I'm not getting paid for it. So that's something, instead of, I was trying to get, some clout, but I was just like, no, Taria, like, you're gonna have to charge for your services, charge what you're worth, because I know what I bring to the table. And once I started doing that, I actually found that people didn't have a problem with my prices or what I, felt I was worth, because my work, spoke for itself. So I would definitely say that was my mistake, for sure.
I would say for me, one of the biggest mistakes I made early on was hiring someone that was just not at the same caliber and motivated as the rest of the team was. And that just completely crippled our culture in the very beginning of starting the company. And it's just one of those things where you get put in a bad place where you're developing a product and you need this person. And oftentimes they're underpaid or their payment is subsidized with valueless stock until, you exit or IPO. So, you have all of this, it's hard to find good people. And essentially, if you hire the wrong ones, it can really damage your company. So I did that once, fired him eventually, but it was really hard and definitely slowed us down and crippled us big time.
Yeah, I think the biggest mistake that I made is not making the transition quick enough to being a manager. At this point, so we have over 300 employees right now. And so the speed at which we needed to hire and the structure that we needed to have and the processes around interviewing and promotions, because we were hiring so quickly, there was a lot of one-off decisions of, okay, this makes sense, give this person this much, promote this person, give that person that. And then you just create a lot of, call it managerial debt of things that you really need to change and fix and set up. And so I think sort of planning ahead for success and planning for growth is something that I could have done a little bit differently.
I would say on my end, just muddying the lines between employer and friend, employee and friend, has always been something that I've struggled with professionally. So yeah, just certain people who are great friends aren't the best employees, and you just have to recognize that within people. And you're not always in the best position to be a manager to a good friend of yours. Sometimes that can impede into a relationship. So that's something I've learned along my entrepreneurial journey.
Great, thank you. We've had a couple questions come in on the Q&A, and by all means, feel free to add more. I'm going to address this one that's actually was a question we were going to ask about how COVID-19 has affected your work. And the question specifically is, in light of COVID, you're the sole proprietor, you're your own boss. What obstacles or new challenges are you facing? Have you been affected at all? What advice could you give to those who have to change gears in light of unemployment? And is there a new normal for any of you as your own boss?
Well, I work in the hospitality industry, just through and through, for my day job and with my business. So my life pretty much stopped on March 17th for about 2.5 months. So I definitely have been reaching out to brides and, just gauging when I think that there could be a wedding. Right now there are no social events. People aren't really, thinking about planning weddings. They're going and they're getting married at courthouses. They're getting married in small ceremonies with their family. I definitely thought I was going to have to shift not only my business, but my actual career in restaurants as well. With that being said, I do have more hope that things will return back to normal because our restaurants are now seating 50% capacity on the inside, which is super exciting. So it, lets me think that there's going to be, a new norm, but things will eventually get back to normal. So for anyone that's going through that, I can say that I literally, during quarantine, I just came to a point where I was like, I just have to have faith and relax because everything was pretty much out of my control. And I think as entrepreneurs, we're so, attached to success and what we want that, we have to sit back and realize sometimes this is not something that I did. It's not my fault. And, I just kind of, just rode the quarantine highway, as I like to say. But honestly though, I would say to honestly just have faith, and if you do have to make a change, make sure you're doing something that you love still in any capacity. So
yeah, I think we had a sense of what was coming maybe more quickly than a lot of companies, just because we have a lot of relationships with suppliers in China. So it's kind of funny that the month of January and February was us getting on the phone every week, talking to our suppliers, like, are you gonna be able to send us product, really pushing them. And then come March, we were like, please don't send us product. We don't need anything. We have no demand. So come March 15th, you're sitting there, you have 5 markets, revenue is dropping from 50 to 80% in all of our markets. One of our markets had to shut down completely. So it was a whirlwind. There was a lot of, went through layoffs, renegotiated literally every contract. I think every landlord that interacts with Revel doesn't like us because there was a lot of negotiations there. So it was tough. But I think we also used it as an opportunity to grow and go on the offensive. So there's a lot that we've done as a company from giving free rides to healthcare workers to giving away products to restaurants that were trying to stand up delivery services, things that we could really do. One thing I would say that I've learned from this is if there's ever a challenge like this, I think you really need to take swift action very quickly and do it in a way where, at least in COVID, there were some decisions that we made that I think we made some cuts and decisions that were definitely on the steep end. So I think really acting quickly and taking dramatic action has benefited us now.
I've always been a big control freak, and in that same kind of light, creating an e-commerce company made a lot of sense because everything was kind of to keep everything within your control, kind of manage your own fulfillment, manage your own website development, your own product, all that kind of stuff. So we've been incredibly lucky to not be impacted extremely hard by COVID. Also, I didn't realize that sunglasses were an essential item. A lot of people look at them as, protection, whether they're interacting with other people or just from the sun and stuff like that. So it's really forced us to, we were in the midst of rolling out a lot of retail relationships. REI had just picked us up. Nordstrom, we were in talks with Nordstrom and a number of other big retailers. And this is kind of forced us to challenge that strategy and to almost to double down on our e-commerce strategy because so much more is in our control, and that's ultimately what's going to benefit us in times like these. At the same time, our suppliers have been disrupted. So right now our inventory is dwindling, and we're about a month out. It's peak season, peak sunglass season. This is when people are buying those sunglasses, and we're going to be out of stock for about a month, which is going to be a huge hit to our revenue. But what we've done, we've been able to adapt and kind of transition into pre-sales rather than just instant delivery. And people have been extremely understanding, and we've just been overly transparent with our customer base and anyone who's interested in these that COVID is an issue and it's disrupted the global supply chain, and we'll be delivering these in about a month. So I think just keeping as much in your control as possible, specializing, but also adapting really quickly, like Paul said.
All right, thank you. Ethan, did you have anything to add on that? Okay. For participants who might not know, Mercersburg offers an entrepreneurship class as one of its sort of senior capstone classes, which is obviously new since I was there. So for panelists, if you were to come back and speak with the class, what's one lesson you would encourage high school students to learn while they are still in high school?
Do you mean like a class or a skill, or do you mean?
Could be anything. I think a skill or a trait, or perhaps a perspective.
I think if I'm relating it back to entrepreneurship, I think one thing that's important is just presentation skills. So the ability to take a topic and boil it down to what's important and explain it to an audience, and to tell a story. I think when it comes to telling the story around your company and what's important and telling that to different audiences and getting people to buy into that sort of like presentation skills is something that I think I use almost every day.
What's benefited us a lot is just being hands-on with everything, and that's how I've been in my life. Like my whole life, I've just been very hands-on, and I think that's benefited us in multiple ways. Now as a growing business, we're starting to hire out a team now, and it's really difficult to hire out the right people when you don't know what the job is how to do the job perfectly yourself. And you might not be an expert, but at least you understand what the most important parts of those are. So you can make a good hiring decision based off just practicing on your own and getting your feet wet.
For me, I would say, I can say that Mercersburg actually taught me how to multitask. Like being at Mercersburg, I was in dance, taking dance classes, president of the ASU, started step team, had some kind of way to go to Romeo's and get food, make sure I had some type of social life. So I would definitely say that the skills that you learn at Mercersburg, um, we learn a lot of skills I feel like we don't use, like geometry, but I feel like learning how to multitask and time management and that rigid schedule that you're on, like take that to life and really think about how to prioritize what you need to do and get everything done in the day and use your full 24 hours to the best of your ability. So
Say, so just do what you want to do, find your goal, and then pursue it. Don't care what people think. And that's kind of what I've done. And like, I've gotten a lot of like naysayers, and you always have naysayers. Just like, don't worry so much about the pressures because most people are wrong anyway. And just kind of find your goal and then just like attack it. And that's kind of the advice that I don't think most people get, and they need it.
Great, thank you. Thanks, everyone. A couple questions from the alumni in attendance. One is, someone asked if any of you have taken advantage of the stimulus bill, the CARES loans, grants, etc. And if you have or you haven't, either way, what's your perception of how fair the government has been to your generation of young entrepreneurs in that process?
So I can go first here. We were able to take advantage of what's called the payroll protection program. So in applying for that, it was a very difficult process, a lot of problems with our bank and a lot of late nights. But it's allowed us to hire back a lot of our operations employees and a lot of our employees that we had to let go, which is great. The second that those programs came out, we just assumed that we wouldn't get any money, just from the standpoint of how is it going to work? Is this actually realistic? And we just had to plan for it not happening. So I think we were very lucky that that went through, that we were able to hire employees back. I think whether or not I feel that the government has been fair, I honestly don't have time to think about it. We just got lucky, feel that we benefited from it. It's helped us out a lot personally. So I think we're definitely thankful for that. Yeah.
I would say for myself, I'm currently back at work because of the PPP loan that my restaurant group was lucky to acquire. So I was able to come back and I was able to bring staff back because of it, because we have to. So that's been, that's benefited me. Not so much my small business because, I didn't really see anything from the government on that. But I mean, I haven't been focused on that. I haven't really thought about them giving me anything. I didn't expect them to. So I haven't been
Stepping in a little bit, I was thinking if you guys can talk a little bit about the finance processes, especially for students, things that they're probably not aware of, what that process looks like, how that process was for you trying to get backers and what that looked like, and also maybe how you can protect your intellectual property. Paul's thinking of you, or Nikolai, your products are so visible. Have you had any challenges trying to copyright stuff, or what have you learned in that area, intellectual property?
I'll start with your first question about financing. So we launched Ombras. When we initially had the idea of Ombras, we presented it to a few different investors. And before having a proof of concept, we basically realized that going and asking for money we were gonna have to give up a lot of the company to get financing. So we decided to launch with a crowdfunding campaign. And that really required a lot of those presentation skills and storytelling skills, as Paul said before. We ended up being fairly successful, raised about $200,000 in pre-sales, and that gave us the runway to launch a production line, launch the brand, and really build our product. In terms of intellectual property, we knew from the very beginning that this was going to be a big deal for us. So we actually started writing our patent before we even launched our crowdfunding campaign. We talked to a number of law firms. A lot of people probably wouldn't recommend what I'm going to say right now, but after talking to a lot of law firms, we realized it was going to cost like 30 to 50K to get a utility patent on our invention. And we didn't have that money, and we knew we didn't want to spend that money on that, even if we had it. So we ended up just reading like hundreds of different patents that were somewhat related to what we were trying to do, and essentially just copy and pasted and stitched together a utility patent. And then for a fraction of the price, like $2,500, we hired a law firm in Seattle, one of the best IP firms in Seattle, to kind of like proofread and legalify our utility patent. And that actually got approved by the USPTO in September. We also copyrighted our brand name and stuff like that. So I'd say like there's always there's a lot of like standard ways to do things that you can read about and that people have done before, the kind of like tried and true standard ways to do things. I would challenge those every step of the way, because there's always a new and different way to look at those kinds of challenges and come up with solutions. You know, we have so many more resources available now than we have before. And yeah, just keep challenging all of the norms that you think you have to abide by.
Jason, can you repeat the first part of your question?
I guess, one thing, for students, they probably don't know what that kind of getting backers looks like. I mean, they've watched Shark Tank maybe, and think that's what it looks like. And what did that look like for you, and what did you learn during that process?
Yep. I mean, the good thing is 2 years ago, I had no idea either. I had no idea, like, how do I get money? How does that work? Like, I literally Googled bank and went to a Bank of America, and that was where we first set up our corporate bank account. Like, we started from scratch. So for us, it's been a long process. The first thing that we did is my co-founder and I, once we had this idea, this is what we want to do, we essentially put the savings that we had built up since graduating, so 5 years for me, or however long it's been, 10 years, I'm thinking college, and put in our life savings and didn't take a salary for 6 months. And with that, there were a lot of friends and family that once they saw the confidence that we had in the idea, they had no idea what we were doing, but they just believed in us as individuals. And so we were able to gain some steam from just friends of friends, things like that. As we started to pick up steam, then we got connected to some high net worth individuals, some more angel investors. So the first round that we used to go from an idea to launch in 6 months was all friends, family, high net worth individuals, and angel investors. A lot of that is because my co-founder and I, we don't have entrepreneurship background, or at least we haven't started a company before, or we don't have proof of experience. So getting those connections to maybe venture capital firms was more difficult at first. So did that to launch a small pilot. The pilot was all about just a proof of concept of this works, there's demand for it. We just need to start to grow it and scale it. So after that, and to give you a sense of scale with that, with our angel round, we had 57 different investors. So 57 different investors, that means we had hundreds of different conversations to raise that. So that was about $1 million. And then 6 months later, after having this pilot in New York, we raised what's called a seed round. The seed round for us was $4 million. That allowed us to expand it to New York and really prove out demand even more. And then raise a Series A of $27 million to expand into these 5 markets that we're in now. So a lot of conversations. And I think one thing that we really learned is because we didn't have that background, what we were really gaining a reputation around was just our ability to move fast and execute really quickly. And so that then just led to more conversations, more people getting excited, more people seeing that we were just doing what we said we would do. And then in terms of IP, I think we've transitioned a lot as a company. At first, because we were having so many conversations, we would share anything with anyone. Like literally, like, you want to know about what we're doing, we'll share our pitch deck, we'll email it to you. I don't care about NDAs, whatever you want to do. Like, we just cannot slow down this process whatsoever. And then the honest truth was at the beginning, there wasn't really a competitive moat. We just had an idea. We knew where we wanted to go. But as we've matured, we have, a legal team in-house. We have a general counsel. We have software and technology in-house. We have all of our operations processes in-house. So we've just kind of matured. So we didn't let the fear of protecting our IP get in the way of learning, having conversations, being connected to the right people. So that's sort of how we approached it.
Thank you, Paul. Ethan?
You're muted, Ethan.
Yeah.
Sorry, Paul, question for Paul. Did you see you have 57 angel investors in your first round of funding?
Yep.
Oh, wow. Your cap table is probably crazy. That's awesome. I think Paul kind of hit everything: raising capital, friends and family, going to investors. I'd just be duplicating what he said. So what Paul said is what I'll say.
Ethan, I know you work a lot with intellectual property. Anything you want to share about how you try to protect it as you go along?
In technology, especially anything technology related, your IP is really like the software you write. And there are processes in place where you can get various formal protections, but a lot of time it's overkill. When you write code and you have employees and they sign their IP assignments, so anything they write is owned by the company. That's really all the protection you really need. If investors and you don't meet investors and they'll say, well, what kind of patents do you have on your software? These are very amateur investors who say these types of things, because generally speaking, at early stage, it's just an overkill. You don't need it right away. You have intrinsic protection by writing the code or having employees who've signed agreements who write this code that it's owned by the company. And as long as you have non-competes, or if you have employees that leave and there's under some sort of obligations that they can't give away trade secrets, that's really where your power is in a technology company. And anything that's like a commodity, or I can see a hardware or a new device would need extra protection. That makes a lot more sense. But in the technology space, it's a lot easier, in my opinion. A lot of these protections aren't necessary as far as formal copyrights go or design.
Interesting. Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah.
A question for the whole panel. Looking back as you started your company, what was one thing you realized you were not prepared for in the life and work of an entrepreneur?
When you're running your own business, it just never stops. You never get a break. A lot of people who don't run their own businesses, they have the ability to just unplug and come home and enjoy life. Whereas I'm sure everyone in this panel and every entrepreneur is always just thinking about their business and what's going on and what's next, and it's really hard to shut that off. So
I couldn't agree more with Nikolai. I think the amount of times I'm having a conversation with someone and I'm looking them right in the eyes and I'm thinking about I wonder what subscription pricing would do. I can't shut it off. It's very difficult. So I think you hear about work-life balance a lot and how that's a challenge for entrepreneurs, and it's 100% true. And there's work-life balance of actually separating yourself physically from work, but it's just very difficult to get yourself to stop thinking and realize when you're actually being unproductive. So that's definitely a challenge that I've had personally.
And on that same exact note with the work-life balance, one of the hardest things that I didn't realize, but you have to do, is you have to separate yourself from the company, as how you see your personal self-worth cannot be the actual company, because startups are very volatile, and you'll have super high, great experiences, and you'll have very low, something happened, you lost a contract, something didn't go well. And what happens is when you're this in it all the time, you'll start to see yourself and your self-worth as a person as a reflection of how the success of the company is doing. And that's extremely dangerous, and it makes you do erratic decisions. So understanding how to separate your time, work life, and also how you see yourself and the company as two separate entities. I think having a bit of an autonomy and a little bit of separation between you and the company gives you the ability to make much clearer decisions that is the best for the company. And that's kind of one of the challenges, at least I think I faced.
For me, well, just piggybacking on what everyone basically has said already, I've taken like self-care. So like, just really thinking about like, I literally am that person that's on the phone, like on my off day, like all the time. So even like I'm in my 20s, even like dating, I've been on a date and it's been like, hey, I'm just really wondering about these shoes for my dress. Do you have time? And I'm like, I just gotta go to the bathroom. And then I'm in the bathroom stall talking about wedding dress shoes. And then I come back out and then my server is throwing up and my manager that's on the floor is like, I need you to come in. I don't know what to do. It's just like, just really like taking time. Like I literally will go on vacation and just turn my phone off. And I've learned that I've had to just learn how to turn my phone off. And I know, especially in our generation with social media and just, leisure on our phones, I think that it's really important to like disconnect for a little while and just, just focus on what makes you happy. That's not related to work. So I definitely.
I'm happy to hear that work-life balance emphasis from most of you. That actually resonates with me as well. A question for Taria from one of the participants, actually asking about your perspective as a minority female in the hospitality industry.
So I will say that because there are so many different facets of the hospitality industry, it has varied for me in in the different areas. So I would say in event planning in my business, I find that it's a much more diverse area of hospitality. There are a lot of, women of minorities and actually more event planners than not are women. So I'm a little more comfortable in that area. As far as restaurants are concerned, I would say that I'm definitely a minority in restaurant management, especially being in, like higher ranking restaurant management. I feel like there are a lot of floor managers. You go to restaurants and you may see a minority female, but being an assistant general manager, or for a time I was actually an acting general manager while my general manager actually was promoted. And I did, there were some times where, not only am I a person of color, I'm a woman, and some men don't like to listen to that, when they're coming in to eat and they would like to get a table right now. And I'm like, I'm sorry, sir. And it's, not only that too, just to add on to that, I look like I'm 12. So people are like, you can't be the manager. And I'm like, nope, it's me. They're like, there has to be someone. Nope. That's all you got. So I definitely would say that it's a lot about confidence. And I've had to learn how to stand firm and be to any man, nice firm handshake, hello, and, stand my ground and be like, this is my restaurant and, this place I run, and I need you to just, enjoy your time here, and I want to give you a good time. And for, events, I can be a little more soft and, a little more nurturing and, fluff dresses and do floral arrangements, which makes me very happy. So it's definitely a nice balance for me, for sure.
Great, thank you. Thanks. I'm curious to hear, and I imagine the participants are curious to hear what's next. New projects, new companies, anything anyone wants to share? What's coming down the pike?
Well, for me, I'm excited. I'm applying to go back to school to get my master's. And I want to actually get into event spaces. So I'm actually in the process basically my goal in life is to open up event spaces and to run my event business out of them for catering and event services. So I'm going back to get my MBA, and I'm also interested in getting into commercial real estate so that I can, get the going on getting some event spaces out here for some cool, cool industrial looking spaces for these brides. So that's my next goal and project.
For me, I took a step away from Study Tree, and I don't know what that means long term, just because of COVID-19 and how the universities are under such an economic crisis. We're going to see a crazy thing happen in them over the next few years. Consolidation, that's what's going to happen. And I currently work at Cisco, and they're actually building a technology very similar to what we had at Study Tree. So I'm just trying to get them to acquire our IP. That's really what I want to happen, and then it's a big win. But right now, I've been focusing on a few other projects, one having to do with the government and tracking firearms. We're actually making a lot of headway, and this potentially could save thousands of lives. Then COVID happened, so then everything kind of was put on pause. So since that is on pause, I've just been taking kind of some of the skills you learn as an entrepreneur and pitching to investors and storytelling, and using that on the more social side, like telling stories around building companies or scenarios I found myself in. And I've never really been a social media person per se, but apparently I'm pretty good at it. And in the last 2 months, I went from like 0 to over like 50,000 followers across a few platforms. And it's growing pretty quickly. And I think if I just look at my trajectory and just do some basic, like run it like a business, like model out your growth and see what that actually looks like. If you run it like a business, you can do some pretty great things on the social media side. And I think that it's all fresh territory. Even though it's been around for a while, I think it's still a land grab. And if you come at it from a business mindset, you can do like a lot of really great things and create a lot of opportunities. So I will probably continue my projects, but the social media kind of thing I'm doing, I don't know what I call it, YouTube / TikTok / whatever. It's kind of silly to think about, but has a lot of growth potential. So I've been kind of focused on that. And then if I start something else off, I have a massive audience as my first customer. So it works both ways.
I think I would listen to that. There's so many stories that you develop over time, from mistakes that you make, relationships with investors, pitches that go wrong. Like there's just unlimited things to talk about. I think for me, there's really two things that are happening over the course of the next year. We've really focused over the last 2 years on mastering what I'll call our core business, which is just operating shared fleets of electric mopeds. So the operations around it, the software that controls the operations, the brand, the government relations, and we've gotten that to a place where we're ready to grow faster. So we'll have a few markets that we'll be expanding to in the US this year, potentially next spring, looking at international expansion, and then looking into new product lines. So one thing with us is really the core tenet of our company is around electrification of fleets. So that's starting with mopeds for various reasons, and then we're sort of looking at the next stage of Revel, of what different type of vehicle we're going into, what's the business model, what market are we starting in. So I think we'll start to diversify our product lines.
Yeah, we've had one product basically on the market so far, seen great success with that, but our goal is to just round out our product line, make more styles that fit more face shapes, so we open up the market for our business. And then from there, focus a little bit more on prescription. I didn't realize how many prescription needs there are in the US. So, do that, and then kind of get into the kids eyewear field as well. But aside from Ombras, I have like a running document of all the different ideas that I have for that I want to pursue after Ombras. As an entrepreneur, like I just can't help but to like be coming up with stuff all day, all the time, and everything inspires me. So I just try to keep those ideas organized, because someday I might be able to get to some or a few of them.
Great. That all sounds pretty exciting. A question from the panel, or sorry, from the participants. Share some of your insights on how to be taken seriously as a young professional, especially as leaders of your companies. She imagines you've encountered older, more established professionals who may not have taken you quite as seriously at first as they would have an older person in your field. So any perspective on that?
Most people who have this mindset, like you'll meet people and they'll have that mindset, like, oh, you're a kid, you don't know what you're talking about. But that's kind of died. And anyone who actually thinks that still has kind of like taken it back or changed their mind. There was like a transition period. I think like Mark Zuckerberg was like the first like kid to run a massive company and like started that whole transition. So I think we're well through that. Most of the time, don't get confused with like them not being interested because you're like a kid or your product isn't like that good. Like there's a lot of reasons you try to justify things to yourself. Most of the time it's not, because a lot of investors have backed 20-some-year-old kids with millions of dollars. So it just doesn't make any sense unless they're like either a poor quality investor or they don't just agree with your product and they're just trying to be nice to you and not tell you that. So, you know, you have to kind of see it for what it is and not what you think it might be.
Yeah, I'll kind of echo that. I haven't had many experiences with that, but I have, you know, there have been a few instances where, you know, someone has basically just drawn conclusions from, you know, without knowing like a full story or like what we do or the results of our company. For the most part, I've found that people don't judge as much as I thought they would, and you know, they want to see results first and performance first, and they kind of base their opinions off of that performance. So the people that do jump to those conclusions, I don't even want to talk to them. It's like that tells me more about them, and that tells me that I don't really have anything else to say to them. So
yeah, I agree. It hasn't been a huge barrier for me, but I think there's a difference too in coming off as humble versus coming off as tentative and deer in headlights. So I think there's always going to be things when you're young that you don't know, and it's okay to ask questions, but you have to be able to do it in a way that still projects confidence. So I think it's just an element of being humble, but not being tentative, and being willing to ask questions and not feeling like you have to know everything, because I think that's also a sign of inexperience when you're sort of faking it and making things up, and that doesn't shine through as being genuine.
I agree with Nikolai and Paul completely. So I don't even.
Just like one more point on this, like the more successful your company becomes, like the more of this stuff doesn't really matter. Like you could literally, like if you're just doing millions in revenue and you're doing great, like it doesn't really matter. I mean, it matters, but like you must be doing something right. So it doesn't really matter if you're a kid or not, or if you have like some sort of like issue presenting or something. All that goes away as your product grows and your customers validate it. So that's just what it comes down to, really.
Great. And then my last question for the whole group, how was your 10-year reunion?
ha 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 ha.
Oh, and did you do it virtually or no?
No, we didn't have.
No.
I don't think so.
Mm-hmm.
Jason, maybe that's a good question for Jason.
Yeah. Jason.
I mean, obviously it was tough, and we also have people from all over the, you know, Nikolai from Seattle. I don't know if any of you guys were able to make any of the virtual events in here. You know, hopefully we'll see you next year. You know, back when we try to combine the two reunions, of course. But again, you know, I want to stay mindful of people's times, and we're at 8:30 in here. So, but that went pretty quick, and you know, thanks so much to Lois for running the session, and thanks to you guys for leading. You know, Ethan, I loved that you were able to share that you remember your performance at as the magician as being a kind of key thing for you, or you know, and it's great to be able to connect Mercersburg to it. It's great that many of you guys continue to use your Mercersburg resources. You know, what a great lesson that you've taught us that way as well. So thank you to our panelists, of course, and of course, thank you to our attendees for coming in and taking the time to listen. I'll be sending a follow-up message, and I'll be providing email addresses for our panelists if there's anything that you want to reach out to them afterwards. But this is actually serving as our last virtual event of the year. So stay tuned, though. We're going to continue to be having these virtual events and celebrating our alumni and creating educational opportunities. But have a great night, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us.